Hi, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Reem Saleh, and I'm the Associate Director of External Relations and Partnerships at the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi. This Arts Chat is part of our virtual Off the Stage series, which also includes community dinners, visits to the NYUAD classes, and post-show Q&As. Even though we're not able to meet in person, we still want to bring the artists to our community. Subscribe to our newsletter or check out the Off the Stage tab on our website for upcoming events. I want to thank our partners and panelists for tonight: Sandy Garcia, Director of Booking at Pentacle, the agency that represents Nrityagram Dance Ensemble; Bryant Hunt from Octopus Theatricals; Sophie Blumberg from Producer Hub, as well as Addie Wagenknecht, artist and founder of Deep Lab. The talk will be moderated by Smriti Nair, NYUAD senior student. I also want to thank NYUAD Career Development Center and NYUAD Art Gallery for partnering with us. As a reminder, and as you noticed, the arts chat will be recorded for social media and internal archiving purposes. Now handing over to Smriti.
Hello, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you to the panelists. I'm very excited about the conversations we'll be having. Just to start the evening off, keeping in line with the theme of the chat this evening, I would like to begin by asking all of you what projects you've been working on over this last year, and briefly touch upon perhaps what the process has been like for you or where you are in the process. This is for everyone.
I'll start. Yeah. Let's see, what has this last year been? I'll try to save some for Sophie, since a lot of our projects have been very similar. But our last year, like everyone, I think has been about shifting course to creating work that can happen socially distanced. We started our year with a project called Activist Songbook that was a community-based project in New Haven, Connecticut that transitioned to be completely online and turned into a months-long endeavor to make video virtual choirs and things. Also Theater for One online, which will be at NYU Abu Dhabi later. We're also working on many other things. One, a socially distanced dance party in a large venue that will hopefully come sometime soon. But yeah, that's sort of the key framework of the year for us, and staying sane.
I can add on to that. I also, I work with Producer Hub, but I also work with Brian at Octopus Theatricals. But one of the main projects of my year, in addition to what Brian was talking about, has been starting Producer Hub. Basically taking this year as an opportunity to think about this platform that we'd been talking about for a really long time, and about how it was really important to build it now. So Producer Hub is this connective resource for people who make live performance. And we took this year where we're all sort of figuring out the new rules of the game to build this platform for us all to have conversation together, for us all to sort of come together and figure it out together. So it's been a year of building the plane while we're flying it, and sort of seeing where the journey takes us.
Hi, I'll add in. So I represent 8 artists. So over the course of the year, the projects that we've been developing really have been, it's been mostly in seeing like the response from each individual artist and what it is that, how they're able to engage with audiences, or how their work engages in this sort of new platform. So it ranges from either being virtual events to in-person, social distanced events. It sort of is very much directed to how the artists have been responding to this particular time. And everything really has been sort of, within this last year, there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of dialogue, a lot of time for the artists to sort of step back a little bit and think about how they want to approach, where they see their value, and how they want to react to these different mediums and what they're comfortable with. And also how they feel that they're able to engage with the audiences more. So some of them might feel more comfortable in a virtual setting, while others might feel more comfortable in a social distance setting. So it's giving them that space to be able to explore that and work with presenters that will support them for that. And in terms of outside of the artist representation, and just as an agent manager, the work that I've been doing over this last year has been with organizations like Dance USA and Creating New Futures, similar to Sophie and Producers Hub, and having these dialogues with colleagues that are other agents and managers and presenters to talk about equitable partnerships, contracting, and sort of reimagining the situation that we've been in prior to the pandemic and where we're going to go afterwards as a field.
I can go. I'm Addie Wagenknecht. I'm an artist based in Austria. I've spent the last year pretty much just trying to stay afloat personally, taking care of a lot of family and friends, and trying to do a lot of work in terms of wealth distribution and activism within my work, in which I can redistribute funds to people and organizations who have been on the front lines.
Thank you so much. I mean, we've touched briefly upon this, but the last time we spoke in our meeting, a few days ago, what is time? Brian and Sophie, like you mentioned how this has been a time for changing course, for throwing out the rules, for reinvention, and how more and more people are being more open to having conversations about what the field of theater, of performing arts can look like in the future. And I'm curious, as in the positions of producers and production coordinators, how have you been approaching those conversations in your work alongside with artists surrounding reinvention and innovation?
That's a really great question. And I actually think that Sandy sort of encapsulated a good chunk of how you do that, which is that you respond individually to the artists about where they see their work needing to go, needing to be, where their comfort levels are. I think it is not the same conversation every time. You have to sort of approach everyone on their own terms and approach it with a sense of possibility to see what is possible versus, well, here is the box we have to do. Here's what's happening. It really is dialogue in the true meaning of the word, in trying to figure out how to move forward or what makes sense, because the frameworks that we're used to working with don't apply. So we're as we figure it out together, it really is just about open conversation and listening and constantly returning to the same conversation. It's an iterative process.
Brian, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I do think, I was thinking about this weekend, actually. There is something that is very similar to the work that we did prior to all of this, in that some of the best work I've been a part of or have seen or have been around doesn't ignore its surroundings. It is built for the time you're in and the resources you have and the people that you're in the room with. And I think that's, it's kind of silly, but that's throughout all of this, that's the thing that has been amazing, is that process still does work. Not trying to reinvent the situation you're in to try to make something that you used to make, or pretend that you have resources at your disposal that you just don't anymore. And a lot of amazing things that hopefully will continue after we are out of whatever we are in right now have been learned from all of that. So there is there is a parallel to the before times, so to speak. So that's been grounding through all of this. I think when we were sort of having that initial conversation, it was kind of like, well, it's all new. You can't rely on anything that you've done before. And I don't think that's totally true. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sandy, I read the note that's on the Pentacle roster, and it beautifully answers the question of where do we go from here with We Move Forward. And I'm curious as to what moving forward entails for you. And you've briefly touched upon this even in our last conversations. And I'm just wondering what the version of theater that you're moving towards.
Yeah. And I feel like very often, like you make a statement like that and it sounds poetic and lovely, but when you come down to, okay, so what do you really mean when you're saying move forward? It's like, okay, this is what we mean. You know, I think that when we were writing it and really believing what we were saying about the idea of moving forward, it's, you know, I feel like this is really an opportunity for us as prior to the pandemic happening, the issues and concerns that were taking place within the field about, you know, reducing audiences, not enough resources, not enough touring, those things were always present. And so this idea that that in conversations with people saying, oh, I really wish things were back to normal, the normal wasn't working for us in the past. And so this really is an opportunity for us to see what it was that was keeping us from being successful or from being able to have those resources to really build a better field. So I think that right now, this is really the opportunity to see what are those things that make us move forward. So moving forward is adapting, responding to the times, finding new ways to connect with audiences. This virtual setting is an incredible tool to connect with audiences. And rather than, I think, being stuck in thinking, I have a building that I need to get people into this venue and I can't sell tickets. How is this virtual tool really helping you connect deeper with this audience during this year so that when you are able to have that live experience, those people have been traveling with you throughout this whole time. And you might end up with 20 people, you might end up with 300 people, but if you're able to build an audience, even with that small amount of people, of just 30 viewers, 10 viewers, what does that mean as you sort of continue to grow into that once we're back into the live performance? So for me, it's being more aware of your surroundings, more aware of how you, and within your own role, within my role, affects the presenters, affects the artists, affects the field. Being more aware, more cognizant of that, adapting and responding to the times, and not waiting for things to return to normal. It's not going to happen, and I don't want it to happen. I want to see how we are able to learn from this and make something better out of our field.
Yeah, definitely the conversation about how do, like, things haven't worked for us in the past. How do we move towards a better field? Just on that train of thought, I've had professors here who, when the pandemic hit, sort of switched their practice to, they reallocated their resources to going on food drives to provide food in the cities that they were in. And Addie, you've mentioned that, you know, a big part of your practice has been activism and redistribution of funds. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, how your practice has changed to incorporate those things more explicitly or more visibly.
Yeah, so I mean, I talked about this in our call last week. Well, it was on the weekend, I've lost track now, but I had a few exhibitions this year that were canceled, and the ones that I didn't have canceled, I felt really involved and very much wanting anything that went in terms of sales to go to organizations or people who are working on the front lines, because I didn't have the capacity to either travel or do that myself. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them were donations to things like ACLU or Black Lives Matter groups, trans activists, animal rights, women's rights, homelessness, and sort of organizations and causes in which I felt that needed the support much more than I would need it at the time. I did more tangible things as well, like after George Floyd's murder, decided to do a print drive is what I dubbed it. And it was basically anyone sent me a receipt for, I think it was $250 initially, showing that they had supported an organization or a person who was doing activist work within the US or abroad for that matter, then would receive a print in exchange. And it was a way for me to basically create a direct line from my art to my activist work and kind of circumvent what I felt like was the question of, is art necessary at that time? Because I was really struggling with the idea of seeing a video and being isolated even more so than we already were, when I very much wanted to sort of be on the streets, but wasn't able to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I also have a question about, was art necessary at the time, but we'll get to that later. This is in the context of diversity and inclusivity, and I feel like I'm specifically for Sandy and Brian, but please, anyone who has thoughts, feel free to jump in. What are the choices that you've been making when curating your program in the spaces of inclusivity and diversity? And has there been an ideological shift in the artists that you are now inviting or whose work you're looking into in this time?
I could go first if that. I would say that I've always sort of, when I started working at Pentacle, it was very important to me that that the range in the work that we were and the artists that we represented was a diverse range. And to the point of, like, as a certain example, I'm currently not working with them now, but we worked recently with a tango company. And it was important to me that if I was going to be representing a company, especially with tango, where it's been so sensationalized and just the stereotypes oftentimes with a lot of programming that you get from that is just so strong, that for me, I felt like if I want to bring something that is a program that is that really shows the true cultural value and the respect to the art form that needs to happen, as opposed to just saying, this is something really shiny and spectacular and So there is a responsibility that I see in myself and that the artists that I represent, that I understand and that I know that the work that is being put out there is being done responsibly. There is a responsible representation. On that same note, I think that, and also language is super important, especially with because it is a wide range of different artists, and there's a lot of hip hop and there's a lot of, theater. The language that is used in talking about those forms and how I market it, and also how presenters who then decide to bring it are marketing it, and that the artists feel comfortable with that wording. I feel like that is so key and so important. And also, just to say that with responsibility and representation, it's definitely this last year has been a situation where I have looked at my roster and I have looked at the artists that I've worked with in the past and that I'm currently working with, and thinking, what is my role and responsibility coming down in the future, as well as to, because it's very strange to think that I'm, for myself to think I have a say in what is considered valuable and what's not. There's a responsibility to that, and I need to own that. And so it brings up a lot of questions, and what that's going to mean in the future for me, I'm still trying to figure it out, but it is something that I think that there needs to be a self-awareness of that, of what is our responsibility and what we're bringing and what we're curating.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think it is an ongoing conversation that we are only beginning to crack the egg of for us at Octopus. I think ideologically, we've certainly shifted, but I think we've been able to hang on to our values and are maybe just a little more aware, or a lot more aware of the choices that we're making. as a on the production side of things, a lot of it comes down to representation in the faces and the people that you're hiring that are not on the stage, that are not the public facing side of things. And you know, you can get very comfortable using the same roster of people because there's a trust there and there's a history, and the work only gets better the deeper the bench gets. So that's been a shift, but also shifting so much to virtual events. I think the biggest change from my perspective has been more about accessibility than the other. We've had those conversations, and it's still an ongoing process. But just the idea that you know, putting subtitles in an ASL interpreter on a Zoom event, you know, or something is it's sad that was a new idea for me going into this, and so it's those types of things that are easy changes to make, and just require a little bit of thought and intention. That those are the things that continue to reveal themselves, that are kind of really useful going forward. Sort of, I don't know, Sophie can speak to this as well. She's been.
Yeah, I think it's sort of English. It's early in the morning here. To distill sort of what both Sandy and Brian said, it's not just about who is speaking, about who's on stage, but also how we select the people who end up visible, the words that we use to talk about the work, and also who is listening and how we're talking to people. One of the things that we've worked on really hard at Producer Hub is to create access to always have an ASL interpreter, to always have captioning, but also to make things asynchronous, to make things free and available, and to also recognize that as we plan things, that we're not only talking to people who have been working in the industry for a really long time, that we're also talking to students. We're talking to people who don't actually know what the term. We did a webinar on force majeure, which is a contract term invoked basically when acts of God or circumstances outside of our control cause forced cancellation, which is something we've all had to deal with this year. And in recognizing that it's a pretty niche topic, we also recognized we had to actually really dig into explaining what it was, because we wanted to recognize that the people who are listening, the people we want to include in the work that we're doing, we can't assume that everyone has the same vocabulary. And I think for us, the vocabulary we use is a really big part of how we are creating more inclusivity. We assume we're all coming in at different levels, and so we establish a baseline pretty early on. But it's responsibility at every step, and consideration at every step.
That's a really honest answer. And all these components of accessibility, language, and responsibility really speaks to your level of care for the audiences that you're inviting to view your work. And that's incredible. I also want to ask the same question of care that we were talking about last week, which is how have you incorporated care in your practice, not just for the audience, but for yourself as well, in your own practices, in your own processes, and also for your artists, and how have the support systems for artists changed over these times? Anyone can take this, since all of you have spoken to this. Sandy, would you want to go?
Sure. I'll say that, like, for the artists, especially in the summer when we were navigating through the multiple uprisings that were happening in the country, where the response and the experience, I think, that every single person living in the States was experiencing was very personal. And because it also very much affected the field and us questioning what our roles and responsibilities were within the field, that the artists themselves were also really thinking through it very deeply. And so the converse. Again, it's 8 different artists with 8 different experiences, and having those dialogues with them to navigate through it, and how the artists were looking at the situation that was happening and what their responses artistically and their responsibility was artistically. Those were conversations that at a certain point, we weren't really even talking about virtual programming or anything like that. It was helping them just being a soundboard for them to process that. And they all went through this. And so there's been a lot of work like that, a lot of dialogue, a lot of allyship. I feel like this whole experience has actually made the work that we do with our artists a lot stronger, and our relationships with our artists a lot stronger, because it really is a partnership. It really is a collaboration. But it's a lot of work. And as I had mentioned last time in the conversation, sometimes self-care takes a backseat to wanting to be there for others and to respond to others. And so that is sort of a tricky navigation to go through. But at the same time, this is such an incredible opportunity. And I mean, this doesn't happen. This has never happened. So this is an incredible, incredible time for things to shift, for things to change. And so I feel like I need to be present for this right now. I can't just let somebody else. I mean, this is really a time that can change things. So so being present always, even though it's exhausting sometimes, I feel like there's nowhere else I want to be than right here, right now.
Yeah, I think just adding to that just a little bit, you know, one thing that changed is the idea of an office hour, or sometime that you are in the office versus not in the office, doesn't exist anymore, because you are always in your office. And part of that is great that we have the technology and the ability to do that. But I think setting boundaries for yourself, when you are on, when you are off, is something that all of us at Octopus have learned and have had conversation about, and putting into our practice as a company of, you know, people's personal situations and either the celebrations or the struggles they're going through are part of our conversations as a company now, which, you know, it wasn't to say that was frowned upon before all of this, but the intention wasn't there. And lo and behold, when you're a person with another person, the work gets better and the relationships get better. So that is a piece from looking at the within a company or within ourselves, piece of the self-care that has changed and I think is important to carry on.
I just sort of want to add that I think this moment, and I think I mentioned this last week in our prep call, like everybody's a human being and everybody's going through this in a completely different way. And being honest about where you are in your journey, and where, you know, Brian knows this, I live in rural West Virginia, which is not where I ended up. I planned on ending up. This sort of happened as a result of the pandemic, and the realities of what that means has been a part of the conversation and how I work. And sometimes my power goes out because it snows too much. And sometimes, and I have coworkers in other places who are working at home with kids who are remote learning. And we sort of, I think the duty of care is also just like, we are all acknowledging that we are all human beings in the same, but completely different situations. And bringing that into the conversation and just being really honest about what that is and what that means and what you need as a part of it, not only you as a producer, but also the people you're talking to. I think but in the before times, it was really easy to be like, okay, yeah, they have stuff going on, but we're here to work. And that's not the conversation now. I don't think it should be I don't think we should go back to the way it was before. Everybody is a human being, and we should care for people as people first, and workers second. Maybe.
Absolutely. Addie, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this question since you asked it in our kind of initial call, and I haven't been able to come up with an answer because it's been so complex and multifaceted depending on who it is I'm speaking to and how I'm reaching out and how the day has gone. And it's constant influx of factors. And so sometimes self-care is a shower, sometimes it's just reaching out to a friend, or sometimes it's setting a boundary and turning off my
This is also what performing arts is like now. We pause mid-sentence. I'm just going to give it a few minutes. Right, till Addie gets back to us. I have another question. Oh, Addie, that was completely cut off. It was like a badly. Oh, hello.
Sorry, I was just saying about how tech should be unplugged and my modem went out. So I was gonna say, just to wrap that up, I've had a lot of friends who have said, remind yourself the pandemic is not a residency, and this isn't necessarily a time that we should expect our being functional at a day job, and just trying to be, again, like Sophie said, that we're human, and trying to remind ourselves that that's really our number one obligation in getting through this, is surviving and kind of surviving together, and that there's no rewards for who burns out fastest.
Yeah, absolutely. For you, Addie, I've also been wondering about, because I've read your bio and you work a lot in spaces between expression and technology. And as a student in an institution, technology has been quite hard to deal with because it's been such a constant presence. And sometimes it has been a little debilitating, just biologically. And I'm wondering how your relationship with technology has changed in the scope of your own creative work, considering so much of work is now occupying these online spaces, which is turning out to be a new medium on its own. So I'm just wondering how your relationship has changed.
I mean, for me, a few years ago, I started doing more screen-based work, kind of as a response to the lack of availability of kind of materiality and the costs of, to be perfectly honest, the costs of the fabrication that were involved. And I started doing kind of more performative pieces on YouTube, and I started playing a lot with things like chat roulette and spaces in which we were inhabiting, but I would say now we're almost exclusively inhabiting. So that was something that's happened, but honestly, the last year for me has been, if anything, I'm pushing away again from screens, because I spend all day on a screen for work, and then for my artistic practice, I'm on a screen. We're doing panels and discussions and lectures on screens, and it's sort of the respite now I'm looking for is very much to retract into my studio and to go through processes and experiment and fail, and not necessarily show those or share those in the way that I would have prior. And so I found, in a way, my practice has become much more private in that sense. I'm doing things and not sharing them, or putting them, letting my gallery know that I'm working on something or developing new works, because I want to have that kind of permission to fail, and that permission to not have to document or be accountable or get likes. So that's something I've really noticed in the last few months specifically, is just like this complete disgust and revolt of wanting to stay away from phones and technology, and just turning them off on weekends and evenings.
Absolutely, 100%. We're nearing the 30-minute mark, so I just want to remind our lovely audience to, if you have any questions, please type them up in the chat, and I will take them towards the end of this session. I just have a question that goes back to this idea of is art necessary? And I would just like to know a lot of attention has been paid towards our positionality in this pandemic, and definitely in academic discourses we've been having a lot of conversation about privilege. and in times of, in times of collapse and in times of lack. And this, I'm addressing this to everyone, so please tell me your thoughts. Do you think it is a privilege to be creating art right now? Do you think that creating work and enabling creative production at the scale that you do is a privilege? If so, how have you been introspecting this privilege?
I'm gonna say yes, because I always say yes. I think it is a privilege to tell stories and make art for it period. It always is. It is a privilege that you can spend time doing it. It is also intrinsically necessary to the human experience. I think it is, if for us to spend our time doing it is important, but it is also a privilege, and the balance of that is complicated. But I think the thing that this year has really made me realize is how in these moments of challenge and struggle and isolation, the thing I turn to is art. The thing I turn to are stories. The thing I turn to are the things that remind me that there is beauty in the world. So yes and no, it's a complicated question, but I think if we were to say it's a privilege and we really need to be focusing on what's important right now, I think the stories are important. Communication is important. The way that we relate to other people is more important than ever right now. And so I think we are responding to the moment we are in, and on so many different levels. And the way we're doing it is through art.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Would anyone else like to jump in?
I'll just say that that it is a privilege for me to be able to work in a field and to do something that I love and that I enjoy, and to work with people that are lovely and that I love being able to support and work with. And on that same note, though, I feel that for artists and the choreographers and their dancers, this is their job. So it's not a privilege for them to be performers. This is their livelihood. This is their job. And so for me, I have a responsibility to ensure that this work that they're doing right now is valued, as that is their livelihood. It's not a privilege to be a dancer. It's their job to be dancers. And so that's when I go into these conversations, especially, when working with virtual engagement, this is their work. And so compensation for me right now is very important, especially for the artists, because you do a virtual event, that's great. But what about the 10 dancers that right now haven't had employment for the last year? So there's a responsibility with that privilege to look after everyone else that is involved, and it's not a privilege for them. This is their livelihood.
And actually, when we were talking about care before, that's another way we take care of our artists. What Sandy's talking about is that we remind people that the work, that what they're doing is work and deserves to be compensated. Especially even though it's being presented in a different way than you're used to. That's advocacy is a really big part of that care.
Absolutely. 100%. Absolutely agree with this. Sometimes academic discourses get very detached from the emotional selves, and it's there's a constant assumption, especially when I talk to people who are not in the arts, that there's an assumption that it is a privilege to be an artist. But it's like you're saying, it's a complicated space. I have one I have this is a question I asked for you before, and I took a lot of heart from it. So I'm going to ask you again because I think you gave such wonderful answers. So a lot of us graduate this semester, and we're going to go into a field that is filled with a certain type of uncertainty. And so I would like to just ask, what would you like to tell us? What would you like to tell us about where we should begin, how we should begin? And how should we try to claim space for ourselves in this field that is now changing at a rate faster than it was before?
I'll go. Yeah, I think, we were talking about it a bit last week, and that, over the last year, and we've talked about it several times this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, wherever you are, that the rules are out the window, and that, we need the new voice in the room, as much as we need the person who has been there for 50 years, in fact, more. And so you are not entering this, without resources or without space to claim. The space is there. And I'm not saying that that's easy, but I don't know. I think that there is a great opportunity to be coming into the field, not trying to insert yourself into the millions of apprentice programs and internships and, pay your dues for 15 years. I run one of those apprentice things. And there's, I don't think you need to feel like you need to do that, or that is a requirement. There is opportunity and advocacy, and I feel like the field is ready to welcome new people in a way that they weren't over the past however long. But yeah, the other thing is, your generation grew up with technology in a way that we didn't. And, I'm not super old, but I remember an answering machine that had a tape in it and things like that, so living in this world where computer and internet and coding and all of that thing is part of your everyday, is going to put you a big step forward, because I think theater, not to say that theater needs to shift to a completely digital world, but in fact, I think the opposite, but utilizing all of these things is kind of the only way forward for a number of reasons. And you're equipped for that. You are built, even in a basic sense, to step into that. And Bill remembers an answering machine.
Yes.
To Brian's point, I think there's the word in your question that I find interesting that you used is begin, because you're already doing it. You've already begun. You're already artists and you're already making work. Yes, you're going to enter a new phase, but you already have an artistic practice. And if the question is about how you sort of find your place in the industry, I think right now the industry is this amorphous, we're figuring it out, right? It's a time of change and experimentation. And it's a really great moment to just insert yourself into conversation. The tables are bigger every day. I mean, the fact that I can be in conversation with you all in Abu Dhabi right now from my, garage in West Virginia is amazing. So it's, I think, finding places just to listen to the conversation, listen to people, talk to people, just and do what you're doing, make the work that you want to do and experiment and grow and build. I think and be a part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. But you've already begun.
Definitely. Addie, would you like to?
For me, my suggestion would be to utilize your networks as much as possible, because you do have this opportunity to be ultra connected, which is both a blessing and a curse. But in that, I think you have access to people who you may not otherwise have access to geographically or for any other reason. And being able to maintain those connections, whether it be artists who come to lecture in your class or friends who become ultimately your kind of peer to peer network, no pun intended, when you graduate, can really move mountains for you, in my experience. And so for me, like, if anything, in looking back from post grad school forward, there were people that the reasons why doors were open or I got certain opportunities was because of those connections and those friendships and those kind of relationships I made at an academic level. And so I really encourage people as much as possible to try to maintain those, even if it's just as simple as following someone on kind of one of the forbidden social networks, and kind of keeping in touch and seeing what they're doing, and, you know, making them aware of what you're doing can be a really powerful mechanism for friendships and everything beyond that professionally. So.
I don't think I have very many words of wisdom. Everyone gave such really great advice that, I mean, yes to everything. Yes to the fact that you have already begun. Like, you're going to look at this 20 years later and you're going to realize that all of these experience that you had from when you're in school to the next internship, to the next job, leading up to, like, all of this, if you are smart and you use that opportunity to learn and to build, is going to be where you ultimately, where you think you're going to end up with. But all of this is all building blocks for it. Every opportunity that you get, every conversation that you hear, everything that you experience is something that you can use to learn and consume and to grow. And networks are huge. You're going to see all of a sudden, 20 years from now, the people that are students with you are going to be the next presenters and the next artists and the next everything. And it's amazing to see that happen. And you don't think it's going to happen, but it does. And so just be I would say, just be present, try to learn, use everything as a learning opportunity. When you fail, it's okay to fail, because that is when you end up actually learning the most of how to be a better presenter, a better agent, manager, a better artist. That's where that opportunity is to grow. So definitely just always be present and try to, just take an opportunity when it comes your way. Don't hesitate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One other thing, when you were talking about this last week, it was a bit tied to the pandemic and the current situation of everything too. And I was thinking about that, and like, yeah, it's tough. It's hard. But a lot of that feeling that, I was thinking about this over the weekend, a lot of that feeling that you might be having, you would be having anyway. It's sort of that unknown, The thing I wish that somebody would have told me when I was in college was that literally everybody is making it up as they go. And to Sandy's point, that 20 years from now, the people sitting next to you will be presenters. And, it's not this idea of, oh, I sit and do this thing for this long and then I become a presenter. Like, we're all making it up. And I find that to be such a relief and idea of empowerment that I wish somebody would have told me. So that's what I want to impart there.
That's going on my study table. Everyone's making this as we go along. I just, before we turn to the audience, I just have one last question. How are you all doing? Just that. How are you? You can answer this as however you like.
I'll go. I'm good. This has been a really great conversation. I was able to get my workout in before I started this. So I'm like, at my 2 cups of coffee. So I'm energized, I'm good. And this is yeah, this has been a really great way to sort of just reinvigorate and remind myself why it is that we do what we do and to keep going. So yeah, this has been great.
I'll second that. This is the best way to start a Monday I've had in a long time. So I'm doing wonderfully.
Yeah, I'll second that too, except I did not get a workout or a second cup of coffee. And so clearly goals I need to continue to put in place here. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got a shower in, but that's about the extent of the highlight of my day. So
thank you so much for that. That was wonderful and lovely. I have one question in, and it's from Michael. They're asking, assuming the pandemic eventually does come to an end, what aspects, creative, technological, or organizational, would you like to keep from current strategies? What would you definitely not want to keep?
for me, it's like the 48-hour workday in 24. I'm really, I feel that I'm on a treadmill with like no stop button and everything's happening all the time, both with my day job and my career and my family and friends, and sort of not getting a sense of true rest. Like I sleep really horribly. So I'm hoping that when this all concludes, I'll start sleeping well again and I'll start sort of having a more balanced life that has seemed really impossible with everything going on in the world. And I don't know, I want to burn Zoom to the ground and otherwise, but at the same time, it's given me an opportunity, I think, to connect with friends, and Lee's laughing. I mean, I definitely have found that like group chats has been invaluable because I have friends who are in Abu Dhabi and Lee's in Chicago who just commented, and there's sort of, we have this like 24-hour time zone that we're all in, and it allows you to participate and connect with people in a way that's not time dependent, if that makes sense. And so that's been really valuable for me as a person that has a lot of really good friends and everywhere else, but where I am right now is sort of having that ability to connect in a way that's not dependent on it being exactly at this moment, but it's sort of linear or non-linear in the sense that it happens when I have the moment and when they have the moment, and we can support each other. So that's something I definitely hope to continue.
I'm going to be really curious to see how Producer Hub moves forward, honestly, because we are all online. We are an online resource. And right now it's great that everyone, we get like hundreds of people tuning into a webinar and watching them and engaging with us. And I think, I actually have a feeling we're going to have to completely re-strategize for the post-pandemic world when no one's going to want to watch a webinar. Everyone's going to Addie's point, want to burn Zoom to the ground. And so I think the thing I'm going to bring with me is the nimbleness, is the adaptability, right? Of it's going to change again. I know that, and reminding myself that this too will change and pass, that I can't get too comfortable, which is both exciting and terrifying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I was sort of going through the list of all the things that are new, and you know, great. I would love to never be on another Zoom meeting in my life. If I never saw another Zoom reading, I would be totally okay. However, it's a tool that, if you figure out how to do it right, can get your work in front of people that would never see it ever in a time without that. So, you know, I guess the things for me that I would get rid of are the stuff that feel like a Band-Aid, like that feel like a thing to just get us from point A to point B, and the only way this thing is gonna work is if everybody involved pretends that we're all in the same room, or we all pretend that we're able to touch each other or whatever, I don't know. And that piece of it needs to go, I think. But you know, it's tough. There's a lot of positive has come of it, and a lot of like Sophie said, nimble thinking and adaptability. you know, a piece that and to Addie's point, working on a 48-hour work week, 48-hour day in 24 hours, the amount of time that as theater makers, we're sort of used to a kind of prolonged planning process in a way. That things usually come up and we're not people, you know, we are all very good at it, but we're not used to like creating something from the ground up in a week. Usually that is you know, what would have taken a month is now taking 2 days. What would have taken 3 months is now taking a week and a half. And that muscle is good to have. And I would keep that as we go forward, but hopefully we can breathe a bit more in all of this.
And I'll be really brief that yes, I'm really looking forward to the no 24-hour workday situation. That is going to be really wonderful. But I'm also really looking forward to, especially right now during this time of experimentation and creation with virtual engagement, I'm really excited to see how that ends up ultimately being incorporated within the live performance as well. Especially with touring artists being able to engage with audiences ahead of them being there in person and what that can do. I'm excited to hopefully we stick with that and we can see some really wonderful audience development and growth through that. So I'm excited for that.
I think I'm going to make a last call for questions, but I think we're also at time right now. So thank you so much. This has been I have a notebook full of notes, and I have a quote that I will put up on my study table as I graduate from this dorm in 2 months. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your honesty and for your time and effort and patience. I'm going to now hand over to Reem, who will appear. There she is. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Smriti. That was really amazing and very inspiring. Thank you to all our panelists, and thank you all for joining the conversation. We hope to see you soon on our next Arts Chat, which will be about sustaining creativity during the pandemic on March 22nd. Stay safe and hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.